My daughter-in-law laughed, drink in hand, and said I looked like her maid, in my own backyard. I was wearing a blouse my late husband George had given me on our 30th anniversary. The same one I wore the night he proposed. My son, Jeremy, just stood there. He heard it, everyone did, but he kept talking to someone else like it hadn't happened. So I smiled, walked away quietly, and that night something inside me cracked just enough to let a little light in. I hadn't even wanted to attend the party. For months, Brooke, my daughter-in-law, had been making subtle comments. A side glance at my shoes. A tone change whenever I offered to help. Whispering to Jeremy like I was a burden they didn't quite know what to do with. But Jeremy had insisted. It's just a casual backyard gathering, Mom. Come for an hour. So I did. I ironed my nicest blouse, tied my hair back, added a touch of blush to my cheeks. George used to say that blouse made me look like Grace wrapped in light. I wanted to feel like that again. Just for one evening. When I arrived, the backyard wasn't casual. There were string lights draped like something out of a bridal magazine. A catering team, women in heels holding cocktails like props. This wasn't a gathering, it was a showcase. A curated moment for Brooke's social media, no doubt. I had barely stepped into the yard before I heard her voice pierce through the noise. Oh my God, doesn't June look just like Morella, our maid in Scottsdale? Laughter, not a polite chuckle. The kind of rolling, contagious laughter that takes on a life of its own. That kind of cruelty spreads fast when it's disguised as a joke. I stood there holding a glass of wine someone had just handed me. My cheeks burned. I looked toward Jeremy. He was across the yard, standing next to a man in a golf visor. Our eyes met, then he looked away. That hurt more than the insult, more than the laughter. My own son pretending it didn't happen, pretending I didn't matter. I excused myself and walked to the guest bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the closed toilet lid, hands trembling, lipstick smudged. I looked in the mirror and I didn't even recognize myself. This wasn't grief. This was something else. A shift, small, quiet, but real. They had made their move. I just hadn't decided how I'd respond yet. I didn't cry on the drive home. I didn't even turn on the radio. Just silence, the kind that presses into your ears until you start hearing your own thoughts louder than the road. The streetlights flickered across my windshield like static. I gripped the steering wheel with both hands, blinking slow and steady. I had hosted birthday parties in that backyard, cooked Christmas dinners in that kitchen. George and I had painted the guest room together, laughing about the color being too close to mint toothpaste. That house held our history. And now, I was a joke in it. When I pulled into the driveway, I didn't get out. I sat there for a long while, keys in my lap, thinking. I thought about all the times I'd defended Brooke, to my book club, to my sister. She's just high-strung, I'd say. She's got a good heart underneath it. But that night, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. How long had I been covering for her? More importantly, how long had Jeremy been covering for her? I wanted to believe he didn't see it, that he didn't notice the little jabs, the snide comments, the way she always interrupted me mid-sentence like I was an afterthought. But he saw it that night. He saw it, and he turned away. I went inside, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and stood barefoot in the kitchen staring at the fridge. A faded photo of Jeremy at 12 hung crooked, held up by one of George's old fishing magnets. He was smiling wide, cake on his nose. My chest ached. Around 8 a.m., the phone rang. It was Lena, our longtime housekeeper, and if I was being honest, the only one who still treated me like I mattered. "Can I stop by?" she asked. That was strange. Lena never asked. She just showed up. For 15 years, she had let herself in with a nod and a warm hello. Of course, I said. 20 minutes later, she was at my door. No apron, no casual chatter, just a small tote bag and a look in her eyes that told me something was coming. And that it wouldn't be small. Lena didn't sit down. She walked straight to the kitchen counter, opened her tote bag, and pulled out a folded manila envelope. Her hands moved with a kind of urgency I'd never seen in her before. "You need to see this," she said quietly. Inside the envelope was a stack of papers. Some were bank documents. Others looked like loan paperwork. But one page made my stomach drop. It was a second mortgage agreement. With my name on it. My signature. Except I hadn't signed it. "I found it in the bottom drawer of Jeremy's desk," Lena said. "He left it open last night. They were outside talking. I don't know why I looked, something felt wrong. I ran my fingers over the signature. It was close. Whoever forged it had practiced. But it wasn't mine. My mouth went dry. Why would he do this? I whispered, even though I already knew. Money. Always money. I think Brooke pushed him, Lena said. They've been arguing about renovations. She said something last week about how your mom won't be around forever. She paused, her voice thick. I wasn't going to tell you. But after what she said last night, I couldn't stay quiet. This wasn't just about social cruelty. They were planning financially. They weren't just waiting for me to die, they were trying to get ahead of it. Speed it up, in legal terms. I felt like I was underwater. I don't know what to do, I finally said, my voice breaking. Lena stepped closer, her tone low and firm. Yes, you do. You just don't want to be the kind of woman who does it. Her words landed hard. I blinked, trying to process them. She's already been that kind of woman to you, June. You just didn't want to believe it. It was the first time anyone had said it out loud. Lena had always been neutral, kind, steady, but now she looked like she was ready to set the house on fire if I asked her to. I picked up the papers and stared at them. They looked like a foreign language. Do you think George knew? I asked. Lena hesitated, then reached into her bag again. There's more, she said, pulling out a smaller envelope, worn at the edges. My name written across the front in George's handwriting. I found this behind one of the books in the den. I think it was meant for you. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. George's handwriting curled neatly across the page in ink I recognized instantly. It wasn't a letter. It was more like a journal entry. I worry Brooke's ambition is getting into Jeremy's bones, he had written. She's not cruel, she's calculated. And I think he's letting her turn him into someone he's not. I read the next line twice. June, if anything happens to me, promise me you'll watch her closely. Don't let charm make you blind. I pressed the page to my chest like a lifeline. George had seen it, long before I ever dared admit it. He had known. And now I had proof. Legal proof, emotional proof. I wasn't imagining this, I wasn't paranoid. They were trying to cut me out of my own life. That afternoon, I paced the living room, the papers still in my hand, George's note tucked under the coffee mug like a sacred relic. I couldn't shake his voice from my head. Don't let charm make you blind. He had warned me in the only way I would have accepted quietly, on paper. He knew I avoided confrontation. He knew I'd rather bend than break. And he had loved me anyway. But now it was time to stop bending. I walked down the hallway and opened the closet where we kept the lockbox. It still smelled faintly of old paper and lemon polish. The key was on the same ring with my church fob. I hadn't touched it since George's funeral. I flipped through the folders until I found the one marked trust will, and there it was clear as day. George had left everything to me. Full ownership of the house, control of the accounts, no clauses, no loopholes, no shared authority. Not even Jeremy's name appeared anywhere. He had protected me, thought of everything, and I had almost let them undo it all out of politeness. I sat down, spread the documents out on the coffee table, and looked at the truth. Jeremy hadn't been helping me manage anything. He'd been quietly shifting control, one signature at a time. And now that forged mortgage. It wasn't an accident. It was premeditated. The next morning, I dressed with intent. Not grief, not nostalgia, intent. Slacks, flat shoes. The navy blouse George used to say made me look like I ran the school board. I wanted to look like someone in control because I was. I showed up at their house just after noon unannounced. Brooke opened the door, wearing yoga pants and full makeup, clearly not expecting visitors. Oh, she said, forcing a smile, you should have called first, June. I need to speak with both of you, I said. My voice was calm, but it cut through the air like a blade. She blinked, taken aback, then called for Jeremy. They sat across from me at the kitchen island like two teenagers who'd just been caught sneaking out. I opened my bag, pulled out the stack of documents, and laid them out, one by one. This, I said, tapping the forged mortgage agreement, has my signature, except I never signed it. Jeremy's face went pale. Brooke folded her arms and leaned back. You're mistaken, she said too quickly. I looked directly at my son. Tell me I signed this, Jeremy. Look me in the eye, and tell me this is my handwriting. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out, just a shallow exhale. Then, how did you get that? He asked, barely above a whisper. Does it matter? I replied. You used my name to take out debt on a house you don't even own. I slid the deed forward. This house belongs to me. George made sure of that. Legally. Fully. Eh? Brooke scoffed. We've lived here for years. You think you can just toss us out over some paperwork? It's not just paperwork, I said, steadier than I felt. It's proof. And I'm giving you one opportunity right now to come clean. Tell me what else you've done, and I might consider not pressing charges. Jeremy dropped his eyes. It was just for the remodel, he muttered. We were going to pay it back. I let out a short laugh. You forged your mother's signature? That's not a loan, that's theft. Brooke leaned in, eyes sharp. You're being dramatic. It's not like we tried to kill you. I stood. You're right, I said. I'm alive, and I plan to stay that way. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from sorrow, but from clarity. For the first time since George passed, I felt him beside me. In the words he wrote. In the decisions he'd made. In the woman he always believed I could be. The next morning, I met with my attorney. We filed paperwork to revoke Jeremy's financial power of attorney. We froze the joint accounts. The house was listed for sale by afternoon. Everything moved fast because I was finally moving. By the weekend, Brooke had planned a full-scale charity brunch at the house. According to the catering website, she'd booked the patio, garden, and even a champagne truck. Networking event, she called it. I didn't interfere, not directly. Instead, I rescheduled the locksmith. Saturday morning, I arrived at the house before the truck did. The locksmith stood by the curb, quiet and efficient, with a toolbox and a slight smirk like he already knew something interesting was about to happen. Everything that matters is already gone, I told him, gesturing toward the door. By the time the guests started arriving, heels clicking, smiles plastered on the locks had already been changed. I waited in my car, parked under a maple tree across the street. Brooke fluttered across the lawn in a rented floral dress, waving at people like she was running for office. Then her hand froze mid-air. She'd spotted me. She turned away fast, but it was too late. The champagne truck driver walked up the steps, tried the door, and found it locked. Confused, he called out. Brooke rushed over, heels sinking into the grass. It's jammed, she said loudly, forcing a laugh. That's when I stepped out of my car. I walked slowly, like a school principal entering a classroom gone rowdy. Conversations paused. Heads turned. It's not jammed, I said. It's been changed. Brooke stared at me like I'd dropped from the sky. What the hell are you doing here? She hissed. Hosting the final farewell, I said, pulling a thick manila envelope from my bag. As of yesterday, this property has been sold. The new owners take possession next month. I'd advise everyone here to grab a drink now. This might be your last one on this patio. The crowd shifted. Laughter turned to whispers. Jeremy appeared at the edge of the yard, pale and tired. Mom, stop, he said. You don't have to do this here. I turned to him steady. Actually, I do, because every time I did it quietly, you ignored me. I handed Jeremy the envelope. Inside were copies of the sale agreement, the eviction notice, and the forged mortgage. His hands trembled as he took it. Don't worry, I said. I haven't pressed charges, yet. Brooke lunged forward like she might snatch the papers, but before she could reach me, Lena stepped into view, phone raised, camera rolling. Smile, Brooke, she said calmly. Wouldn't want your donors missing this. Brooke froze, suddenly aware of how many people were watching, phones in hand, faces no longer amused but curious and some, even embarrassed. You vindictive old witch, she hissed. You think you've won. Everyone here sees what kind of monster you really are. I looked around. Most of the guests were already backing away, some whispering apologies, others grabbing their purses and heading toward their cars. This isn't a victory speech, I said. It's a boundary. Jeremy didn't speak. He just stood there, shoulders slumped, guilt carved into his expression. I saw not the boy I raised, but a man who had traded his integrity for convenience. I turned toward the sidewalk, Lena at my side. We walked slowly, deliberately past the house once poured my life into, past the patio where I'd been humiliated, past the woman who thought appearances could protect her from consequences. I didn't turn around when Brooke shouted after me. Do you think this is over? You'll regret this? You've destroyed your own family? But I didn't feel destroyed. I felt clean. The eviction notice landed on their doorstep Monday morning at 7:42 a.m., hand-delivered by a deputy with mirrored sunglasses and zero patience for theatrics. I wasn't there, but Lena was. She parked 2 houses down, coffee in hand, and watched as Brooke screamed like someone had stolen her car. Jeremy didn't argue. He took the papers, nodded, and closed the door quietly. By Thursday, the moving truck came. Only one, not the 3 Brooke had once bragged about needing. By Saturday, they were gone. No apology, no farewell, not even a text. They moved into a rental across town in a cul-de-sac half the size, and I only knew because someone from my church called to say she'd seen Brooke yelling at the movers while Jeremy just sat on the curb, smoking in silence. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The house sat empty for 2 weeks while final inspections were done. I visited it once, alone, walking through each room like saying goodbye to an old friend. I touched the fireplace George built with his own hands, ran my fingers along the stair rail where Jeremy used to slide down in foodie pajamas, straightened the wedding photo that still sat crooked on the dresser just the way George liked it. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just breathed. 2 days later, the sale closed. A young couple bought the home, a quiet electrician named Marcus and his wife Shelby, a graphic designer who worked from home. They wrote me a letter with their offer, saying they didn't just want a house. They wanted a place to live, to grow, to belong. That sentence alone made me choose them. I left the keys in a glass bowl by the door and told Shelby, "You'll love the kitchen in the spring. The light stays until almost noon." She squeezed my hand like she understood that it wasn't just a house I was handing over, but peace. That night, I moved into a small condo near the library. No crown molding, no grand foyer. But it had quiet. It had choice. And most importantly, it was mine. Lena came over that evening with takeout and a bottle of soda. She looked lighter, too, like someone who had stopped shrinking to fit into the shadows. "You did it," she said, raising a plastic cup to mine. "You didn't just win, you freed yourself." I nodded, smiling softly. I didn't know how heavy it was until I let it go. Later, as we laughed over leftover tacos, I realized something else. We hadn't just survived them. We had become something stronger. Something whole. 2 weeks after the Fosters moved in, I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I rearranged my bookshelves. Not because I had to, but because I finally had the energy to care about the order of things again. I was halfway through alphabeting the fiction section when Lena showed up with a wide grin, a bottle of red wine, and a manila folder tucked under her arm. "We got something to show you," she said, stepping in like she owned the place. And honestly, at this point, she kind of did. Inside the folder was a glossy business license, Elena's Home Harmony, cleaning and organizational services. "You went legit?" I asked, stunned. "Not just legit," she grinned. "I've got 5 regular clients, a girl I'm training, and 2 more referrals waiting in my inbox." I held the document, feeling the weight of it. "You used to say you'd never work for yourself, that you didn't know how." She nodded. "I didn't. Until I watched you burn down your old life and walk out with your head high. You reminded me I wasn't just someone in the background, I was the reason things worked." We toasted 2 women who had been overlooked for too long. "To dignity," she said. "To boundaries," I added. "To silence broken." That night, after the dishes were done and Lena had gone, I sat alone on my balcony. So no phone calls, no guilt, just wind, warm light, and the distant sound of someone's wind chimes. I didn't think about Brooke or Jeremy, not really. I thought about what it means to start over, not because you're vengeful, but because you finally remember who you are. And as I closed my notebook and turned off the light, I whispered into the quiet, "I'm home." And this time I meant every word.